August 8, 1969. In the hills of Benedict Canyon, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and heat. At 10,050 Cielo Drive, Hollywood's elite were sleeping, unaware that the summer of love was about to die a violent, unexpected death. Sharon Tate, the rising star and wife of Roman Polanski, was 8.5 months pregnant. She was a symbol of beauty and new life, surrounded by friends who believed the world was their playground and their eternal sanctuary. Joining her were celebrity stylist Jay Sebring, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski. They were the beautiful people, living a life of bohemian luxury, oblivious to the figures creeping through the long, jagged shadows of the property outside. 4 members of the Manson family, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, scaled the fence. They weren't looking for money. They were looking for piggies, acting on orders from a man they called God, Charles Manson. The first act was total silence. Tex Watson severed the telephone lines, cutting the house off from the rest of the world. In the darkness of the canyon, no one could hear the screams that were about to echo through the hills. Stephen Parent, just 18 years old, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. As he attempted to leave the property, he encountered Watson. 4 shots rang out, marking the first blood spilled on that cursed and bloody night. The killers entered through a window. What followed was a frenzy of violence that defied any logic. Sharon Tate and her guests were rounded up, bound with rope, and subjected to a ritualistic nightmare that would haunt investigators for decades to come. As the attackers fled into the night, Susan Atkins used Sharon Tate's own blood to scrawl a single word on the front door: pig. It was a message to the establishment, a declaration of an apocalyptic war that Manson called Helter Skelter. The next morning, a housekeeper discovered the carnage. The scene was so gruesome that arriving LAPD officers initially thought the red smears on the walls were paint. The reality was far more terrifying than any horror film Hollywood could ever produce. The news sent shockwaves through Los Angeles. The City of Angels was now a city of heavy locks and loaded guns. Everyone wondered, who would do this? And more importantly, would the Manson family strike again before the sun went down? The LAPD was under immense pressure. They had 5 bodies at Cielo Drive and no clear motive. Initially, they looked toward the drug culture of Hollywood, suspecting a deal gone wrong among Sharon Tate's wealthy jet-set associates. While police processed the Tate scene, the killers struck again. Only miles away, Leno and Rosemary LaBianca were chosen at random. Manson wanted to prove that no one, not even the suburban middle class, was safe in their own homes. The LaBianca scene mirrored the Tate murders' ritualistic carvings, blood-written messages, and extreme brutality. Yet, incredibly, the LAPD failed to link the 2 crimes, treating them as separate, unrelated incidents for several crucial and deadly weeks of the investigation. Vincent Bugliosi, a young and ambitious prosecutor, began to see the patterns others missed. He was looking for a thread, a singular mind behind the madness. But the family remained invisible, hidden in plain sight within the California desert. The investigation eventually led to Spahn Ranch, a dilapidated movie set in the desert. It was home to a group of runaways and drifters led by Charles Manson, a man who preached a strange, apocalyptic gospel of revolution. Manson was a failed musician who had spent half his life in prison. He used drugs and psychological manipulation to turn middle-class teenagers into killers, convincing them he was the second coming of Christ and the devil combined. His followers weren't hardened criminals. They were flower children who had traded their parents' dreams for Manson's nightmares. They lived in a communal haze of LSD and total subservience, waiting for Charlie's instructions to cleanse the world. The break didn't come from forensic evidence. It came from the ego of Susan Atkins. While in jail on unrelated charges, she bragged to her cellmate about the Tate house, finally linking the crimes to the Spahn Ranch commune. Word of Atkins' confession reached investigators. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces of Spahn Ranch, the blood-written messages, and the mysterious family began to lock into place. The hunt for Charles Manson was officially on, and the world was watching. In a massive raid, the family was rounded up. Manson was found hiding in a tiny cabinet beneath a bathroom sink. The man who wanted to start a world war was finally in handcuffs, though the legal battle had just begun. Sitting in the interrogation room, Charles Manson was a man of small stature but immense, dark presence. He didn't speak in facts, he spoke in riddles, trying to weave his manipulative spell on the detectives as he had on his followers. To show his total rejection of society, Manson carved an X into his forehead during the legal proceedings. His followers quickly followed suit, creating a visual brand of their eternal devotion to the man they called their soul. The trial was the first true media circus. Every day, the Manson girls would march to the courthouse, singing and chanting, turning a murder trial into a surreal, terrifying performance of cultish loyalty that captivated a shocked and frightened nation. The prosecution's ace was Linda Kasabian. She had been at the scenes but hadn't participated in the killings. Her testimony would provide the inside look into the family's inner workings that Vincent Bugliosi desperately needed to secure a conviction. Bugliosi's theory was bizarre. Manson believed the Beatles were speaking to him through the White Album, warning of an impending racial apocalypse. He ordered the murders of Tate and the LaBiancas to trigger this war and emerge as its leader. The trial was punctuated by violent outbursts. At one point, Manson leaped over the defense table with a sharpened pencil, attempting to attack Judge Older. He was a master of chaos, even when trapped in a court of law. Bugliosi meticulously rebuilt the two nights of terror for the jury. He showed that while Manson wasn't at the Tate house during the killings, he was the Mandarin who orchestrated every stab wound and every drop of blood from afar. What chilled the world most was the lack of remorse. Susan Atkins and the others laughed during testimony about the victims' final pleas. They were unrepentant, still under the spell of a man who promised them a new world. Piece by piece, the evidence mounted. Clothing found in the hills, the gun used on Stephen Parent, and the testimony of former members formed a chain that Manson could not break, despite his theatrics and attempts to derail the justice system. After 9 months and one of the longest trials in history, the jury finally retired. The fate of Charles Manson and his followers rested in the hands of 12 citizens who had seen the darkest face of humanity. The verdict: guilty. On all counts, Charles Manson, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten were sentenced to death. For a brief moment, it seemed that the long nightmare had finally reached its legal conclusion. But history intervened. In 1972, the California Supreme Court briefly abolished the death penalty. The sentences were commuted to life in prison, a decision that would keep Charles Manson in the public eye for many decades to come. From behind bars, Manson became a dark icon of American history. He gave erratic interviews, his face appearing on pop culture merchandise. He was the boogeyman who refused to go away, a reminder of a decade that had curdled into violence. Manson spent his remaining years in Corcoran State Prison. He never expressed a shred of regret. To the end, he remained a master manipulator, receiving more mail than almost any other prisoner in the entire American correctional system. The legacy of the Manson family was the definitive end of an era. The hippie movement's promise of peace and love was replaced by a deep-seated paranoia. The stranger danger of the 1970s was born in those canyon hills. We often remember the killer, but we must remember the victims. Doris Tate, Sharon's mother, became a tireless advocate for victims' rights, ensuring that her daughter's tragic death led to lasting changes in parole laws across the country. Today, the original house is gone, replaced by a new estate, but the ghosts remain. True crime enthusiasts and historians still flock to the site, trying to understand the why behind the madness that occurred on that warm August night. Manson eventually modified his X into a swastika, fully embracing his role as the ultimate villain of the 20th century. He died in 2017, but the dark fascination with his family shows no signs of fading. From a desert ranch to the heights of Hollywood, the story of Charles Manson remains a cautionary tale of how easily a charismatic leader can weaponize the lost and the lonely for his own twisted ends. The sun set on the 60s, leaving behind a trail of blood and a mystery that continues to haunt the American psyche. Helter Skelter was more than a song, it was the day the innocence ended forever.